All right. Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. A couple of y'all know me. My name's Jonathan Head. I've been in the fire service almost 20 years with a little bit of volunteer time, 17 full time. I, since 2007, have been working in fire prevention and developed that program for the city of Poplarville. Um, I spent 4.5 years as the chief of Poplarville, and we currently have the working chief now in this class. So you can kind of attest it's kind of a different position that you're the fire chief, fire marshal, so you're responsible for all this, that, and the other. This is one of these classes that it really kind of spoke to me. I really enjoy the fire inspection, fire prevention aspect of the job. Um, but we're taking these classes to really expand our knowledge and ability. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of good basic knowledge that we'll cover in this 2 week course. That it's paramount. This is just the basic. I mean, you get a pretty certificate for it, but you're going to have to continue. You're going to have to um, go to conferences, be up to date with code
Hey,
changes.
hold on a second. I'm getting a call. I got to see where I got to go.
81 area, cardiac arrest, Dollar General 21458.
We'll be back.
All right. We will be recording this, so you can keep catch up with anything that you may miss.
Hey, that's one of my questions I do have. If we do miss a class, are we able to just go back and rewatch it and enter in an attendance log?
Yeah, I think that the best thing that we're for us is to I'm going to record everything, and that way it'll be available to you. I mean, I know how stuff goes, man. So don't worry about it. We'll get you taken care of.
All right. What about that? What about that PIN number? Or if we watch a recorded class, will we be able to enter that PIN number for whatever recorded class?
Yeah, it'll all cover.
All right, sweet.
All right, y'all be careful out there. Now with this class, it's a difficult class. It's changed. Whenever I took it, it was difficult. They've taken a lot of things out. They've kind of streamlined it, and they've made it a little bit more comprehensible that people can understand it a little bit better. Um, but again, this is just kind of the basics information, basic practices. You're really going to have to get into the code book, IFC or the NFPA books. You're really going to have to work on your proficiency with that, because that's anybody that has a little bit of experience is going to know that you kind of really chase rabbit holes with that, and it's all part of it. As far as this class, this is an LSU class. It'll be accredited through LSU. It's an IFSAC accredited class. However, with that being said, I'm not really familiar on how that system works. Oh, got another one.
Yeah, if y'all don't mind actually, everybody mute just in case.
81 area, cardiac arrest, Dollar General 21458, Highway 36, engine 83, EMS 1, timeout 1817.
Yeah, everybody can mute. I know we got live still going on, but we can kind of mute up a little bit. Everybody will be able to hear, and I don't know if that one's a hot mic just left open. But anyway, with all that being said, there is 15 chapters that we're going to have to cover out of this book. I know some people don't have the book, but you need to read the chapters. The information's in there, and the book is really comprehensive. You can really get a lot out of it. So read the chapters after we go over them. Kind of briefly going over the itinerary. The information's good, but we have 40 skills with this class. They're all testable. Rob and I have been talking. Rob's been speaking with the people from LSU, Fetty, that is going to be doing the actual testing. You'll have to test out for level 1. Once you've reached everything with level 1, you're going to have to test out for level 2. So it's kind of just kind of how it is. So that'll be set up at a later time and date whenever we can get an evaluator lined up for that. So I'm going to be harping on reading the book. We're going to go over the chapters and go over the PowerPoints, but really need to go over the books. We are planning on having at least 2 chapters a night. There's going to be a couple nights where the chapters are they're either very important information or they're just a lot of meat to it that we're going to spend just a night on one chapter. Next Wednesday night, we're planning on trying to get together in Poplarville. We have a college right here that has a large dorm room under construction right now, or dorm building. There's also several amazing buildings that would be great to look at. I've got the go ahead that we'll be good to go to walk through those and take a look at them. And so that's what we have planned. Plan to have a skills after that. After we walk through a couple buildings, we'll meet up at the fire station and have a kind of a skill night. We'll go over some really important things, and then the last Friday will kind of be a review night, and we'll just kind of hit all the high points that we can. Any questions so far before we get into the PowerPoints? All right, I'm hearing the beach as a no, so. All right.
Hey, if you need to mute it, you're in, Jonathan, if somebody loses a hot mic, if you bring up their, if you look.
Okay, I see what you're talking about. Okay, got them. All right. So now we're going to get started on chapter 1. If you have the book, by all means, read along. And oh, come on now. All right. All right, I got that, Rob. I appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to turn off that, save some juice, and then we'll get going on this. All right, so fire inspector principles and practices. This would be chapter 1, introduction to fire inspector. All right, our objectives that we're going to cover is we're going to describe the functions of a fire inspection unit, describe the objectives of a fire inspection, describe the role of the fire inspector within the fire service, describe the roles and responsibilities of the fire inspector 1, fire inspector 2, the relationships between the state statutes, local ordinances, and safety codes, and describe the range of an inspector's legal authority. Also, the types of permits that may be issued, and the ethical practices of the fire inspector. All right, so the effective fire inspections, plans review, public education by fire inspectors. We know that they can prevent fires and save lives. That's our main goals. We're going to try to look at any type of the commercial businesses and buildings, and at all of its different stages, even in the pre-construction phase and plans review to the point of our regular inspections and operational inspections. By doing this, we're going to save lives. We're going to keep exit doors open. We're going to keep sprinkler systems and fire alarm systems up and going. If they're prevented, the line of the duty of the fire service has been accomplished. All right, it kind of goes back to an old adage from Ben Franklin that I always like to share with people, is that an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So if we can prevent these fires from happening, we can prevent these uh, bad things from going on, then we're not risking the lives of the citizens and the lives of our guys, um, and we can make everything a little bit safer for everybody that's all the patrons of these different commercial businesses and all that. All right, the fire inspection unit, it may be part of a fire department or an independent unit. Um, you'll have fire protection engineers that they're typically the ones that are going to be contracted to build a fire uh, suppression system, or have some type of guidelines, or they may calculate fire flow and things and this, that, and the other for these different businesses, and kind of help to keep the underwriters happy and all that. Yeah, you may have insurance inspectors that they'll come out and inspect different buildings within your jurisdiction, and that's on the same lines to keep their underwriters happy. Now, I think most everybody here is part of either fire department or governmental entity. Um, it's like my position. I'm the fire marshal for Pearl River County, Mississippi, and my inspection authority goes through the building department, through the government agency of itself. I'm not part of any fire department as part of my job, um, but that differs in different organizations and agencies. Has the three E's of fire prevention is engineering, educating, and enforcing. So, like I said before, it's kind of working on what works, and we'll get into um, these different tests and different um, programs that develop codes and standards, and to maintain that level of safety, educating the public, and not only just kind of kids during fire prevention week, but you may take a few minutes and educate somebody as to why this is safe in their business. And also the enforcement aspect of it is when they don't when there's I'm thinking of a good political way of saying this is whenever they're not operating properly, or either they refuse to operate properly. There's different means in enforcement and to making them follow the codes and follow direction that they're supposed to. All right, so the question is, what is a fire inspection? All right, it's a visual inspection of a building and its property. All right, we'll talk about a few other little things like property maintenance and stuff like that has a big influence on fire safety. All right, we want to determine if a building complies with the statutes and regulations. We want to reduce risks of fire and maintains protection. Maintain its level of protection that's required for its occupancy. And going back to that on that previous slide, believe me, there's a lot of companies and a lot of businesses and a lot of buildings that will, if you let them get away with things, they will. So that's why we're here. That's why we go out and inspect these properties. So inspections are conducted at businesses, apartment buildings, schools, hospitals, places of public assembly, other occupancies, except 1 and 2 family dwellings. Those typically a residential property that's a 1 or 2 family dwelling is not going to be regulated in most areas. Um, the plans for it may be reviewed, and but typically we're not going to schedule regular inspection in those. But kind of going back in it, that like schools, I know in Mississippi, all of your daycares, they require annual inspections by the state. Hospitals, 2 inspections a year, and those are your organizations that are typically that require state licensing. So those are pretty good about following directions on fire inspections and things like that. All right. During an inspection, we want to test the suppression and fire alarm detection system. Now, the way that we're going to check that, we may not necessarily go and conduct the test fully, but we're going to make sure that they are paying their independent inspector to come out and they check the system. They check if it's like an Ansel system, they're going to check and make sure the propellant is proper and the extinguishing agent is proper and everything's charged, ready to go, and they'll tag it, and that's that form of inspecting it. Also with the fire alarm system and stuff like that, certain systems you can check to make sure they're operating properly. Occupant evacuation drills, we're going to see a lot of that in schools. There A lot of other businesses, they may be required to have an evacuation drill posted, but it may be in the safety plan that is issued out to employees and things like that. We want to evaluate the fire retardancy of a quality of a certain building. If it's kind of getting a little farther ahead, but you start dealing with buildings where you're doing a lot of giving. Well, with that give us some take, and you may have to look and getting a variance passed for a certain building that you're really going to inspect it to look where that they're doing better on the safety side to where you may be able to be a little bit lax on another aspect of it. And then providing guidelines on fire safe materials. All right. Now, your general fire safety or process inspections, we're going to look for any type of overcrowding, like in your assembly buildings, gyms, town halls, any type of event halls and stuff like that. Blocked exits. A lot of times you may see in a mercantile business that they'll have stuff just stacked up, or they'll. We used to get complaints a lot from a local store that they would store things down the aisles, and the concerns was that people wasn't able to reach the exit, or they'll block a rear exit door. There's also other type of unsafe practices that we may find while we're doing these inspections, and we can bring that to their attention. All right, fire inspectors may work in the fire department, independent code enforcement agency, or business that performs the fire inspections as contracted service. I discussed a little bit about that earlier. Local government determines where and who performs the inspections. All right, and that's really important. We'll get more into the administrative and the legal aspects of it. I believe there's actually a legal aspects chapter, and you definitely want that to be on the minutes of your entity's meetings and where you were hired and approved. If you are the fire inspector or the fire marshal, that's part of your job title, so that whenever you're going and you're doing these inspections and this code enforcement kind of work, that you're backed by your agency. Fire inspectors that work within fire departments may assume other positions. They have fire marshal, fire investigator, fire and life safety education specialist, and fire protection engineer. Most places, especially around in our world, here in the south east region of the United States, we're going to see that one person's pretty much everything, and they do everything. Now, with this, I've kind of went over everything, and I don't agree with some of it, but it just is what it is. But this is the information to know for the tests coming up. All right, your roles and responsibilities for the fire inspector, and they're really breaking down the inspector 1 and 2 aspects of it. The inspector 1 is going to conduct your basic fire inspections and apply codes and standards. All right, so you just kind of going in, doing a basic inspection, saying like a daycare inspection or either a new commercial property inspection, something that pretty simple. All right, and the job performance requirements of an inspector 1, and these are things that we'll see again. I know they really harping on everybody knowing what your responsibilities and abilities are. But inspecting your structures and writing reports is very important. There's actually a whole chapter just on report writing, and we'll go over here in the next few days. Identify the need for permit and how to obtain it. Recognize the need for a plan review. Investigate common complaints. Identify codes and standards being violated. And participate in legal proceedings. And that may be, it may not necessarily be court, according to how your agency and how your department and municipality or government agency is set to run. Your board of supervisors, city council, city aldermanship, they may be the appeal process to where somebody has, if they don't agree with part of the code that you've tried to help them and they don't agree with it, you may have to go and testify before your government board so that to justify what you found and how it violates the adopted ordinance or code and what impacts that it plays. So that's a really important part. And we'll typically, it gets handled before then, but you need to be prepared. And that's basically in a nutshell is just really backing up your observations and making sure that everybody knows exactly how this is affecting public safety. All right, we want to identify the classification of a single-use occupancy. It's very important to be able to do that because that's what you're going to base your group off of for your code research and things like that. Compute allowable occupant load in a single-use occupancy. Evaluate exits of a building and verify the type of construction for a remodeling project. Determine if existing fire detection and alarm systems are working properly, kind of like what we talked about earlier. We want to make sure fire extinguishers are working properly, checking the tags and the inspection rings around the neck and all that good fun stuff. We want to recognize any hazardous conditions involving either equipment, processes, or their operations and point out if there's an issue in that. Compare plans to existing fire protection system if they're wanting to change things. If they're wanting to change up their building, and say it has a sprinkler system and whatever occupancy they're going to requires it, is that going to be enough? To verify that your emergency planning and preparedness measures are in place and have been practiced. That's something that pops into mind with that is like for a daycare or a preschool. Are they doing their fire drills and things like that? Inspect sites for emergency access. So all right, so our water sprayer guys are line guys, they've got to get in there if they're in the event of emergency. So can they get an apparatus there? Can they access the fire department connections for sprinkler system? Do they have access to a water system? All those different things that we're going to inspect for those sites. And we'll go into that a lot more later. We want to verify the hazardous materials, flammable liquids, gases are being stored, handled, and used properly in accordance with laws and codes. And recognize a hazardous growth potential, determine code compliance in that property, verify that it has sufficient water supply to the area. With that, it's going to take a knowledge of the area, a knowledge of the fire department and its operations to be able to determine that. So, all right, so now we're getting to Fire Inspector 2. All right, and you see the guy, and he's sending out his minions to do the field work, and he kind of stares at plans most of the time. But bigger departments where they have those divided, that would be great. But for most places around us, it's everybody does a little bit of everything. All right, so they conduct most types of inspections and interpret codes and standards, and that's a big change there to notice in this is that the inspector 1 is going to kind of follow the code, but inspector 2 is going to interpret it. What is the intent of the code and how does it apply in this specific situation? All right, the job performance requirements for an inspector 2 is to process that permit application, to process a plan review application, to investigate complex complaints. I recommend the modifications to codes and standards. Maybe something that's in the code Maybe it's up for readoption or adopting a new code set. And you may not like what's in the code. It may not work for your specific area. And that's where you can kind of do your own research and figure out what's going to work for you. All right, we want to recommend policies and procedures for inspection services. And that's where you can kind of, if you see an unsafe practice, you can say, hey, why do you do it like this? I think it may be a little bit safer if you do it like that. Also to compute the maximum allowable occupants load in a multi-use building. All right, a few little differences can make a big difference as far as your occupancy load and things like that. So this person is going to have a little bit more knowledge and ability to be able to really deal in with all those um, figuring the occupancy for more complex and more one that has more variables in the problem. To also to be able to identify the occupancy classification of mixed-use buildings and determine the building's area, height, occupancy classification, and construction type. Also to evaluate fire protection systems and equipment, analyze the elements of exits in a building, evaluating hazardous conditions, emergency planning procedures, and verify code compliance for hazardous materials and flammable and combustible liquids and gases. I think everybody has some form of LP gas or some type of hazardous operation or material that comes through their area, and it's really important to be able to make sure that these are being handled and stored properly. We'll look at fire growth potential and to inspect emergency access for the fire department. Again, it's kind of redundant from the inspector level 1, but it's also for all fire inspectors. Make sure the fire department can get there and put in an effective attack. Verify the compliance with construction documents and ensure that life safety systems are installed, inspected, and tested. All right. What is kind of explaining there with compliance with construction documents? Typically, in a large scale commercial and project, you're going to have the plans that have been reviewed, and then you'll have what was actually built. When they get into the process, they may find that there's an issue where they're not able to comply or to build it as it was engineered, and they may have some type of change on the fly and a different change order put in. That's typically not covered. It's not re-examined. Typically, that's handled over a phone call. Hey, we can't do this. We need to do that. And that's where the level 2 inspector is able to take in all the variables and to look at the circumstances and their totality and come up with a what will work in those situations. But also you need to make sure that it's being made properly. And if they don't include you in that, and you go to look for a final inspection, and it says one thing, and they're like, no, we're not going to do this. That's something where on that enforcement side, you can hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they're building it properly. Excuse me. All right. You're also classifying occupancy types of buildings. And that plays in, again, big factor whenever you're chasing the rabbit through 4 or 5 different code books. And you want to make sure that you identify the type of occupancy properly. All right. Being able to commute the maximum allowable occupant load. Again, reviewing and the proposed installation of fire protection systems. It's kind of calculating fire flow and things like that. Verify the means of exit elements are provided and meets codes and standards. That's the size of the door, anything that prohibits the door from opening properly, so on and so forth. And we'll get into that for sure. Verify the construction type of building based on the set of approved plans and specs, which we kind of already spoke on that. All right, so we're going to talk about codes and standards, and they provide us guidance for the construction and use of buildings. So our code is going to be a rule or law enforcement a fire protection, life safety, building construction, or property maintenance issue. All right. Excuse me again. All right, so our code is going to be what's adopted. In most places, whenever they adopt a code, it is law. It's an ordinance, and with that, there's an enforcement ability with that code. And some may be a city may have a citation for a fire code violation that is just a violation of a city ordinance. You may have some where it's in certain states where there's actually state statute that uh, that's regarding that, and that a law enforcement officer that has the ability to swear affidavits can either place a person under arrest or write a citation for. All right, your standard is your document giving specifications defining minimum levels of performance, protection, or construction. All right, so your standard is going to, like your NFPA standards on whatever. That's kind of your specifications on what it needs to do, what it needs to perform like, and what we're expecting to get out of it, and be able to entrust that whatever, whether it be a wall covering, uh, gypsum board, fire board, rated assembly, or whatever, that we know that's going to meet its standard. All right, your model code organizations, model code organizations. I get that out right. They're going to write or develop codes and standards for adoption. Our model code organizations are like the International Fire Code or International Code Council, that they cover building codes, fire codes, residential codes, LP codes, so on and so forth. They also have NFPA, Life Safety 101, and you may find some towns in certain areas. Don't know about Louisiana, but you may have some that are on Southern building codes or some other code sets that predate the ICC standardized sets. So be aware of what's being used in your area. But these are kind of a conglomerate of firefighters, fire protection engineers, contractors, construction workers, that kind of come together, that once an issue is determined, and they work together to find the best way to handle that situation. And it could be, for example, fire alarms. We push them so very hard in fire prevention, where at one time it was kind of a pain that contractors didn't want to install them. They didn't want the extra cost that was associated in building our house. So now it's common practice. We're seeing that right now in home sprinkler systems. So that's where these different codes and standards kind of come together, and then again you can have different modifications for those codes in your area for what works and doesn't work. All right, you have your technical advisory committees made up of different interest groups to be affected by the codes, and again, that's kind of the same thing where you'll have your firefighters, your construction workers, your engineers, your everybody all at the table, and kind of talking about their interest and what area of respect that they represent. Now, the goal is to work together and kind of come together to have something that'll agree to everybody. I've always said if you had a building built by a fire prevention guy or a fire inspector, um, it would cost too much and you couldn't live in it. So we have to have that happy medium. All right, prescriptive code. We're going to list specific details an installation or construction must meet. The building code, and that's one of the things is fire code and building code goes hand in hand. You really have to be familiar with both of them. Um, they do leave a little bit of gray area for the inspectors to kind of make a little variances here and there, but for the most part, they're going to be pretty strict on your type of material used and how it's put together and all that. All right, your performance-based codes outlines the requirements a design has to meet, but typically doesn't matter or doesn't list the particular method or material that has to be used. For an example on that, say your exit signs. If you look at it in the code sets and the earlier code sets, it's going to give you a certain lumen, and it's going to say that it has to be a certain type bulb and battery backup and so on and so forth. As technology has developed, you may have some type of a luminescent glow in the dark that gives off the same exact level of brightness, but it's not covered in the code book because it's not a lighted fixture with a bulb and battery backup and so on and so forth, even though it probably performs better. And that's where your performance-based code is, that it doesn't matter what you do as long as it meets this and this level of safety, this level of performance, it's going to work. All right, the adoption process. All right, when a new code is created, say one of the things that we're working on, COVID's kind of knocked us back as far as in our area, is adopting a new code set. As things update, society, different changes in society, construction methods, environment, and stuff like that, we want those codes to reflect that. So no codes are updated. We may find some things that work for us better, things that don't really work all that well. It kind of goes back to, would a construction feature for snow load really affect people in South Mississippi, South Louisiana? May not. But the proposed language is prepared, and that's typically, you're working with whatever legal counsel your agency uses to keep everybody happy. You may have a code specific to your area because of whatever issue that has come up that has required that, say your department has had an issue in building collapse, and they want to prevent that from ever happening again. All new construction needs to be built, and instead of having 2x6 floor joist, we want to see 2x8s or whatever. And that's something to where, to meet the intent of the code, and to also to keep everybody happy. Then it's reviewed. It's people, subject matter experts can kind of look at it and see, validated. Is it too much? Is it not enough? Is it something that is just going to be on paper and not really do what it's intended to do? Once everybody's happy, it kind of gets posted. Have public input. What does the public feel about this? It's going to make the construction of a house, go up $800. People may lose their minds over that. So you never know. Your public hearing is held to where the actual government agency, or government entity rather, can, your board of supervisors, your aldermen, your council can hear concerns from the public, and then they vote to make the code an ordinance and to put it enforceable. All right. And we talked about that. The codes and standards are adopted under most of the state laws and local ordinances. Now, understanding the legal processes, and I mentioned a little bit before earlier, the legal authority for the fire inspector varies by the state and often within a state. The authority for my level of authority for my job here is completely different from maybe the level of authority from a fire department fire inspector, or municipal inspector or something like that. And then it's also kind of according to the situation. Whenever I was working for the city of Poplarville, I'm also a certified police officer. I have the legal authority. I was commissioned by the city police department, and if I needed to write a citation, I could. but that authority, that line of authority is already established. And typically it's going to be included in the job description. And it should be included in the job description, just so that you don't have somebody that's kind of doing more than what's wanted. The authority having jurisdiction is responsible for the enforcement of the codes and standards and the enforcement requirements, approving equipment, materials, and installation or procedure. All right, so and it's also in the very front of code books where it talks about the administrative section, the authority having jurisdiction and whose responsibility it is. You get a chance to read into that, and that's something I believe would be an assignment to read over the administrative section. All right, your state and local law affects every aspect of your job, and that is very, very true. You may have specific requirements that every written notice must follow on it. The range of authority is defined by your state and local law. It may cover your types of property, sizes, and then type of inspections that you're able to do. For instance, in Mississippi, all right, just for an example, something I get a phone call about all the time, drives me crazy sometimes, is we're part of the Mississippi Insurance Wind Pool in South Mississippi. All mobile homes have to be inspected by the Mississippi State Fire Marshal's Office. Now, I am duly certified, appointed, and all this, that, and the other fire marshal for the county, but I don't have that authority. I don't want that authority. Poor guys with the state, that's kind of something they were that they got put into their area of operations. But this is kind of an example because they needed somebody to inspect it and to ensure those properties they have mobile home inspectors. And you may have something similar, but for different means. So be aware of that and where you fall in that. You may be involved in legal proceedings, criminal or civil, according to how your agency wants you to be involved. You get into court, any decent defense attorney is going to attack your training, your expertise, your procedures, your guidelines, everything, and certifications. So your documentation of your training and of your credentials is going to be important, and then your policies and where you're following those policies, you're documenting everything really comes into play and really helps out. All right, so permit is a document stating compliance with or restrictions for the use based upon the applicable codes. Some places are different. You hear either a CO or a certificate of occupancy is another term for your use and occupancy permit. You may have a special use permit for an event, and that event could be held either in a public place, or you may have a certain type of event where areas are cordoned off and things like that. Your fire protection equipment permit, if say your sprinkler, or maybe you have a warehouse, like some type of commercial warehouse where they use a deluge system, you may have to have a special permit for that, for the amount of water and runoff and so on and so forth. Hazardous materials use permit, like LP gas places, any other type of material processing plants, so on and so forth. Just a few examples. You may also, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I wanted to check first. You may also have like hot work permits if you have a manufacturing facility, and your agency can require a permit or a hot work permit to be pulled whenever there's any type of welding or cutting on metal or something like that has a higher than average percentage of having a fire hazard develop from it. Worked at a place before where they absolutely refused to do it. The city did not want to have anything to do with that. So, but most of your places are going to fall through like a building department kind of setup. That's how we are in my current job, to where all the certificate of occupancies kind of go in to where not only is it signed off by the fire marshal, but it's signed off by the building official. And it has to have both signatures to validate the certificate of occupancy. All right. The application process. All right. This is some of your skill stuff. So pay attention on that. You may want to go back and look at that. Read it very well in the chapter. Is the owner submits the permit application. All right. The permit is reviewed, and it's either approved or denied. Very, very simple. I know it kind of sounds a little too simple, but there's a lot of different variables. Is the owner, are they applying for the proper thing? Should they be applying for something completely different? Is everything that they're going to do be included in the permit application? That's why it's very important that it's reviewed for its entirety. And then based on that, whether it's improved or denied. All right, ethics and the fire inspector. This is one that's really big. Hold on, guys. We're getting to the end of it, so just bear with me. All right, the fire inspectors must not be influenced by business or political interests. All right. And there's the fine line. My little soapbox. It's hard to be an inspector and not have that in mind, especially those who work in municipalities where you may have a friend of the mayor wanting to do this or wanting to do that. And it's now, I'm not saying to be pressured. Definitely don't be pressured, and don't be influenced or coerced or forced into something. If it's something that you absolutely feel that is not safe, stick to your guns. I've known some of my friends in fire prevention that they were expected to sign off on something that was not safe, and they told them, hey, told the mayor or the alderman or the councilor or whoever the governing body was to say, okay, well, you sign it. You sign off on it. And if something happens, you're responsible for it. But that's one of the things that you're going to deal with. If you get in, especially if you are the fire inspector or you are the fire code official for a jurisdiction, you're going to deal with these places that are wanting to put in a multi-million-dollar facility in your area and tell you, well, if you don't agree with this, then we're just going to go down the road. Most of the time, no, that's not the case. But it's also part of your job to find, if a variance, and that's a big if, a proper variance can be made if there's a certain issue, that's something that you can work with. All right, ethical choices are based on a value system. If the organization have clear values, use that system. If not, substitute with your own system. All right, it's kind of, what does that say in there? Is kind of follow what you think's right. You're ultimately responsible. It says in the administrative section of the code book in the IFC that you're not held liable as long as, and I'm paraphrasing here, that you're not held liable as long as that you're acting in good faith. Well, you can still be held liable. Civil liability is something that doesn't stop. But if it doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, you either work to find a variance or deny it and do what you got to do. Clear organizational values can stem from having a code and ethics that's well known. All right, you may have to, especially if you're taking over in an area, and you may have a previous inspector that, and I've heard of this happening, that did fire inspections from the driver's seat of their car. There's no way you can do that. But anyway, but if you go in there and say, no, this is the right way, this is the way it's going to be done, they're going to know, hey, don't mess with this guy. Don't try to play games with him because he's serious. or she. Selecting employees that share those values, especially if you're in charge of a fire prevention division or bureau. You want to make sure that anybody that you bring in there that shares those same values and is going to do the right thing. Ensuring that management exhibits ethical behavior, and that's the thing. If you're the guy in charge, you need to be the one showing everybody else how to be. Have clear job goals. Don't try to obscure them. Have performance appraisals. That's where where you get assessed, and also you assess your people to make sure that everybody's doing their job properly. Um, and then implementing an ethics training program. Sometimes we need to be reminded. Some people may not see it as you see it, and you may see a big ethical issue, whereas others necessarily may not. All right. And in part of your career, you should always develop these skills. If you put down fire inspector and you don't do anything with it, you don't look into books, you don't keep up with different changes, it's going to leave you. So you want to continually develop your professional skills and knowledge. Go to conferences. Go read up. The IFC has different books that kind of talk about how codes have changed over the years. They have kind of a little supplemental information that is really important. And it's really good to have that knowledge and to understand that, especially if you're going to be working with um, um, creating new codes and adopting codes for your area. Then also professional organizations, state agencies offering continuing education and professional credentialing. I know Mississippi has an association of fire inspectors. Want to say there's international groups and stuff like that too that kind of offer those. All right, so in summary, real quick, effective fire inspections, plan reviews, public education efforts conducted by fire inspectors can prevent lives and save property, or prevent lives. Prevent fires and loss of life. A fire inspection is a visual inspection of a building and its property conducted to determine if the building complies with all pertinent fire and safety statutes and regulations of the jurisdiction. All right. They're conducted to reduce the risk of fire and maintain a reasonable level of protection of life and property. Fire inspectors will work within a community's fire department or independent fire code enforcement agency or business that performs fire inspections as a contracted service. Codes and standards are regulatory or industry adopted documents that provide guidance for the safe construction and use of buildings. Code is a rule or law established for the enforcement of fire protection, life safety, building construction, or property maintenance issues. Standards is a set of specs or requirements that is considered industry best practice, meets minimum level of performance guidelines. Job description of the fire inspector should list the limits of legal authority, how to gain the next level of experience. Many fire inspection activities result in the issuance of permits. You need to know how all that works. All right, so that's it for chapter 1. Remember to read the chapter. All right, we're going to get into chapter 2. No, we're not. Go away. Let me see. I believe it is chapter 4. There we go. All right, and we're going to I'm going to have this schedule posted. It's going to be talking about the different classes or different chapters we're going to go over each night. So by all means, you can read ahead and we'll go over everything. But we're going to get into fire growth. These aren't real big chapters. Fire growth is really important that we know what in kind of that a fire inspector knows how fire is going to work. That's something, especially if you're going to inspect your property, you need to be able to tell people of why fire caulk is important in all of your overhead projections through walls to prevent fire from spreading as the flames and heat rises to the top, and so it doesn't easily move from one building or one room to the next. Um, just a small little example there. So we're going to go back over fire growth, so we're kind of up to speed on that. Our knowledge, we're going to describe the ignition phase, growth phase, fully developed phase, decay phase of fire. We're going to describe the characteristics of a room and contents fire through each of the 4 phases of fire. We're going to describe how interior finishes affect fire growth and how decorative materials may affect fire growth. Furnishings may affect fire growth. How the building construction elements may affect fire growth, and how to obtain the fire spread smoke development rating for the contents of an occupancy. One of the things that I recommend everybody go look up the UL, this Underwriters Laboratory. This is on a video on YouTube. It's a test of modern materials and older materials, like your natural woods and cottons, linens, stuff like that. They start a fire in a room that's filled with older contents with natural materials, and the newer with all your plastics and your foams and stuff like that. And it's just mind blowing. If you haven't watched that already, I encourage you to do so, because it shows how fires spread so much quicker now, because pretty much everything we have in our homes is all plastic, petroleum based stuff like that. All right. So we know that a fire inspector ensures code compliance, analyzes the situations, identifies the adverse situations, and acts accordingly. All right, chemistry of fire. This is kind of 1001 all over again. But we need to know these things, like I said, to know how these codes are going to affect buildings. One of the very important things that I've learned, fire, the definition of fire is very important. We talked about different legal proceedings, and you may have to stand on a stand in a courtroom and tell a jury what fire is. And it's going to be the chemical process that produces heat and usually light. There's another one that says the byproducts are smoke, heat, and light, and all that. But it's really important to know that, especially whenever you're having to work in something like fire inspection or investigations, where you're really having to prove your observations. Matters, physical substance with mass and volume. All right, we have our states of matters, are solids that have a defined shape. Your liquids, they assume the shape of the container and are fluid. And gases that tend to expand indefinitely. All right, the fuel is any material that stores potential energy, and then energy can change from one to another. All right, so the picture there off to the side of what the fuel is for each item. You have chemical energy that's either exothermic or endothermic reaction. Exo being outside, it releases. Endo, internal heat. Mechanical, which is typically your friction, where it rubs together to produce heat. Your electrical energy, your light, being thermal radiation. Nuclear, whether it's controlled or uncontrolled. Fission, fusion, all that good fun stuff. The conservation of energy, it cannot be created or destroyed. And talking about the elements needed for the fire triangle, and the oxygen, fuel, and heat, but we know that has been replaced with the fire tetrahedron, that and they found, because you can have fuel, oxygen, heat all together, but you have to have that chemical chain reaction to start and maintain the fire. All right, incomplete construction create combustion. Guys, you have to bear with me. It's been a long day today, so we're going to get through this, and I'm trying not to mess up as much as I can. All right, so smoke includes the particles, vapors, and gases from incomplete combustion. All right, they're lifted in the thermal column. So remember, hot things rise. So smoke's a hot gas byproduct of fire, so it's going to rise. The partially burned particles become part of smoke, and completely burned particles become ash. All right, from incomplete combustion, we have the different toxic gases. You have carbon monoxide, very important. That's becoming more and more of a thing, and that's just a little tidbit, is that carbon monoxide detectors, where it was not part of the fire code, is now introduced in fire code in certain situations, mostly your residential occupancies, and it's specifically in dorm rooms. But you may see it more and more being pushed in our area. All right, hydrogen cyanide, byproducts from a kind of mattress and foam, phosgene gas, carbon dioxide, and as it lists here, can cause hypoxia. So something to look out for. Carbon dioxide's used a lot. Every fast food place and well, pretty much every food restaurant has a supply in it for the drinks. All right, your heat. We know heat is hot. All right, the fire spread. You have conduction, that transferred heat through matter. Some objects conduct heat better than others. You have metal. We know metal conducts heat very well. You have convection, the circulatory movement of gas or fluid with areas of different temperatures. As you can see, they have like a little flame on a candle, their hand held above it, and those are the convection currents of the heat coming off of the fire there on the candle that can burn the hand. And yeah, I always say that's the dumb guy in those pictures that's sticking his hand over fire. So our next one is the fire spread through radiation, and we have those that transfer through the forms of invisible waves, and the thermal radiation, it travels in all directions. So as firefighters, we know that we're going to fight fire, and we're going to extinguish it by a few different methods. We can cool the fire. We can bring the material below its ignition point, and we take away that part of the fire tetrahedron, and it goes out. We can exclude oxygen, taking away that part, it goes out. Removing fuel, same thing. We're interrupting the chemical reaction with a flame inhibitor, which would be a very kind of expensive way of putting out a fire or a campfire. All right, going over the different classes. Class A involves solid combustible materials, and we cool that down below its ignition point. Also, Class A fires, anything that leaves an ash. All right, Class B is the flammable liquids. We can put these fires out by shutting off the supply of fuel or excluding oxygen. Also, things that come in barrels, like gasoline, oil, things of that nature. Class C is energized electrical equipment. And once the power is cut, we can use a Class A or B fire extinguishing agent to extinguish that fire. You remember that Class C is anything that carries a circuit. Class D is combustible metals, and it says in here must be attacked with special agent, and in that picture it's showing titanium being on fire. You also have magnesium that's common, that we see in vehicle fires and things like that. Another method is passive cooling, and that way you kind of shower lightly in mist water onto it to passively cool the object. Now, of course, if it's a large piece of a flammable metal and you put water on it, it's going to throw all kinds of sparks and it becomes a hazard. But we can passively cool those and put them out. Class K fires. This is something that we as inspectors are going to deal with. You will know about a commercial kitchen from the tile down to the ceiling. You will deal with this so much. Class K fires are required to put out the deep fat fryers. Any fires with the deep fat fryers that you see virtually everywhere, especially in southern cooking. So, this we know that we need to have those in place, and those also are going to supplement your hood systems and your extinguishing Ansel systems and stuff like that. All right, characteristics of solid fueled fires. Now, they don't burn in the solid state. They have to be heated, or the technical term, pyrolyzed. And that's where, according to the material and the rate and manner the heat is applied, the ignition source is going to vary. So that's something to where you realize that, imagine that you have a piece of wood. You're not actually burning the piece of wood. You're heating it up to the point where the piece of wood is releasing flammable chemicals in the right oxygen to fuel threshold and applying heat to ignite that fire. Now, the solid fuel fires progress through the 4 phases. All right, so we have the ignition phase, and that's typically where it's limited to your point of origin. Your growth phase, where it spreads to nearby fuel. All right, so as the fire heats up, or as it grows and as it intensifies, it heats up all the surrounding materials to the point where they pyrolyze and they start releasing their flammable gases to where they ignite, and that further intensifies the fire and causes it to spread. Other factors like wind and ventilation and all that plays in, but we're just kind of talking about the basics right now. The fully developed phase, the produces maximum rate of burning, and that's where it's going to burn all the available fuel, or it's going to ignite all the available fuel. The maximum heat is produced at a maximum rate. So, kind of the old timers that say she's blowing and going, that's pretty much it. The decay phase is where fire runs out of fuel. The thermal radiation and hot gases decrease because there is nothing there left, or nothing left there to burn. All your flammability is out of it. It becomes smoldering embers and then goes out. There's a old time firefighter that says all fires go out eventually, one way or the other. Whether the fire department goes and puts it out or not. But anyway, that's the decay phase. So we know that the principles that we need to be aware of and keep in mind is the hot gases and flames tend to rise. That convection is primary factor in spreading fires upward. Downward spread occurs mainly from radiation and falling chunks of flammable material, where you'll have some drop down of material. And then once all the fuel load is burned, then it goes out because it's missing that part in the tetrahedron and it can't continue on without something to fuel the fire. Variations in direction of upward spread occur if air currents deflect flame. What we talked about, ventilation. It has to breathe and it has to exhaust. So, according to keeping that in mind in certain construction types and construction features, it may be there to control ventilation and control flame spread. And I think we talk a lot about that in building construction. The total material burn reflects intensity and duration of heat. All right, so it says total material. I always would like to add the type of material. And like I mentioned before, you may have some type of petroleum-based product, plastic, foam, something like that, that's going to intensify that fire. That's going to accelerate the chemical reaction and the intensity, and it's going to make it burn hotter and faster and more quickly to ignite the rest of the ignitable material. Also, adequate supply of oxygen must be available to the free burning fire or fuel-free burning fire. And that's it. If you don't, you can have all the fuel in the world, but if you don't have enough oxygen support ignition, you're not going to have fire. So room and contents fire. So contents, like I was talking about earlier, synthetic products pyrolyzed to violate volatile products. They're flammable and toxic. All right, I talked about the intensity and the flammability of these synthetic materials. There's also the level of toxicity. Right, hydrogen cyanide that I spoke about a little bit earlier is byproduct, some things that we really don't want to breathe in. Wear your SCBAs, guys. Fire contributors include the painted surfaces, carpeted, and furnitures. Kind of what we've talked about in the last chapter about your standard practices and tests and things like that. There's actually a test, and I don't believe this book covers it, but it's called the Steiner Tunnel Test, where they actually will test painted surfaces, carpets, furniture, upholstery, and things like that, and how it holds up with the specific material and how it holds up at certain temperature and heat ranges and for a certain period of time and so on and so forth. An example of a room and contents fire in the ignition phase. This example shows a fallen candle ignites contents in a plastic wastebasket. Was very specific on the plastic wastebasket, but again, remember synthetic materials, it's going to have more of an intense fire. All right, and the growth phase where that additional fuel is drawn to the fire. Um, and I keep harping on the synthetic materials, but think about that whenever you're inspecting a building, say a mercantile or a little whatnot business that has all kinds of retail merchandise in there, and it's all plastic stuff from China. So it may be more prudent to have a higher level of fire protection in that property. So anyway, but it heats the nearby material and spreads the fire. Your fully developed phase, where at this point the heat has went up over, it's ignited the bed, the all the other areas around it, and they increased where the flammable materials undergo pyrolysis, and then that's the point where flashover can occur. All right. Now what's flashover? Anybody? Guy in the first row? All right. Flashover is where everything in the room all ignites at the same time. All right. I know that's not the proper basic class response, but so we're going to remember that's really dangerous. So I make that a point to say that again, in your fire loads that you may find in these places, you're thinking of how quick are we going to go from the fire starting to flashover. All right. Keeping that in mind, is this a significant threat to the occupancy that you're inspecting and applying the making sure that the proper fire protection procedures are in place for that? I keep thinking in my mind, we have several convalescent homes, and they from time to time like to store up things or like to have an excess of decorations and all that. But kind of keeping things in mind is given the situation, given the occupancy and the residents, may have to change that a little bit and go for a little bit safer given the safer situation given the circumstances. All right, so then we get to the decay phase. Open flame burning decreases in smoldering. The only thing here is that I guess everything was in a concrete house because that's the only way that the structure is still standing. But you see that the contents has burned away. Also, some special considerations is the flame over. The flame of ignition of hot gases layered in developing room and content compartment fires. Your thermal layering, gas rising with their heat and forms layers within the room. And then backdraft, the sudden explosion of heated oxygen deprived fire gases when oxygen is reintroduced. Being aware of that definitely helps your different types of considerations for fire. All right, the characteristics of a liquid fueled fire is that it has to be converted to a vapor. It has to mix with air within a certain threshold to be able to ignite. The amount of liquid vaporized is related to the validity of of liquid. How volatile it is. So keeping that in mind, especially if you're dealing with a processing or a company that uses different chemicals in their processing. Their flash point is the lowest temperature in which that the liquid produces its flammable vapor, and then your flame point or your fire point, the lowest temperature in which the liquid produces enough vapor to sustain the continuous fire. And an example of this is if you have diesel, right? Imagine you have like a pot and you put diesel on it and you put that on a burner. Well, at room temperature, you can put a cigarette lighter to it. It's not going to ignite. But if you start turning on that hot plate underneath it and it starts heating up to where it starts releasing its vapor, then you're going to get to that flash point to where you'll have little flutters and flashes. You'll also have if as the temperature continues to rise in the liquid, it will produce that fire point to where it will produce those vapors and they'll be able to sustain that fire. All right, your vapor density is the weight of the gas compared to air. All right, is it lighter or heavier? Your flammable limits or your explosive limits, your the highest and lowest concentrations for particular gas and air ratio to be ignited. So your lower explosive limit, your upper explosive limit. Principal sources of ignition of flammable liquids includes open flames, sparks, hot surfaces. Typically, your hot surfaces has to come in contact. Has to be more of a direct contact, but you may get a vapor close to a flame or a spark to easily ignite. And a point on your hot surfaces, say for an example, say you have a motorcycle a motorcycle, use that as an example, and you're out riding it and you take it for a long ride and some fuel splashes out of the tank or out of a hose or something or out of the carburetor and it splashes down on the exhaust pipes and you have that direct contact. It vaporizes very quickly from being heated up very quickly from the heat of the exhaust pipes and bam, there you go. I see that in vehicle fires as well, especially kind of your older carbureted vehicles. Now we're going to talk about BLEVE, very important that everybody reviews about this. It's the boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. It's where when it's stored in a pressure or a vessel under pressure, if the temperature exceeds the liquid's boiling point, that fuel is going to expand and to the point where it ruptures its container and releases. Right, fire growth is greatly influenced by building construction, and it's referencing the Coconut Grove nightclub fire in Boston in 1942. And that's something that I'm going to try to do is reference um, some different case studies that of where if a modern fire inspector would have looked through there, how many lives have been saved, and but we'll talk about those later. Um, the fire growth can be caused by a building and its contents. Um, it may be hidden or exposed. You may have um, hidden areas and void spaces and things like that in the building, especially if you have an older building that's been remodeled over the years. So, and it also can result from the furnishings, the interior finish, and the building construction elements. Um, you may have combustible fiberboard that is part of whenever a building was first built, and they just kind of put a covering over it or something. Foamed plastic, electrical insulation can also be the lack of electrical insulation. Uh, I've worked in an area where they have some really old buildings that's still using some really old wiring. I've had in the last couple months, I've had a couple old barns that was made with that was made around the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, that still had the kind of the fibrous insulation on them, and not the standard plastic insulation. And I've been able to determine the cause of the fire on that was because of a short in the wiring, because it was how old the wiring was. Right, your interior finishings. It increases fire extension by surface flame spread, can generate smoke and toxic gases, and you may add fuel to the fire. As your heavy shellacs, heavy polyurethanes, can also, you may have. I know this was a concern at a certain aesthetic time period where people wanted to put carpet on the walls, and there are some type of carpeting that is made for wall coverings, but they may have, especially new carpets or new age carpets, may have a certain fire resistance as it's laid flat, but once you put it up on a wall, um, then it can actually be a fire hazard. But again, your whatever interior finish with those few examples can generate more smoke and toxic gases and add fuel to the fire. Furnishings, drapes, your curtains, decorations, chairs, couches, bedding, so on and so forth, definitely can promote fire growth in a compartment fire. The potential is directly related to the construction materials. So you have things like drapes and curtains and mini blinds as well, something that's like a soft plastic, easily melts, hot enough fire easily ignites, and it can help with fire spread, especially if it's a low starting fire. It can run up a drapes or curtains pretty easily. Building constructive elements. It can be fire resistive according to the occupancy and the type of building that it needs to be. Non-combustible, semi-fire resistive, or combustible construction. And you'll see kind of your non-combustible, semi-fire resistive, and fire resistive types in more of your commercial. You may see it in separations between apartment buildings and things like that. But your combustible construction is going to be your stick frame houses and things like that. It's important to determine that buildings meet codes and requirements to limit that fire growth. Your flame spread and smoke development ratings. I kind of got ahead of myself and talked a little bit about it. and this is kind of one of those standardized testing, and the American Society of Testing Materials. You'll see that, and we're talking about test method E-84 being a tunnel test, and it's typically conducted and they list Underwriters Laboratories, but there are several other third-party independent testing laboratories that um, conduct different testing on materials and practices. All right, so in a review, we know that matter exists in three states: solid, liquid, and gas. Energy exits in many forms, including chemical, mechanical, and electrical. Conditions necessary for a fire include the fuel, oxygen, heat, and a self-sustaining chemical reaction to support the ignition. And fire spread by conduction, convection, and radiation. Four principal methods of fire extinguishment are cooling the fire, excluding oxygen, removing the fuel, and interrupting the chemical reaction. Fires are categorized as Class A, B, C, D, and K, and they reflect the type of fuel that's burning and the type of hazards that the fire represents. Solid fuel fires develop through four phases: the ignition phase, growth phase, fully developed phase, and decay. Growth of room and contents fire depends on the characteristics of the room and the contents. All right, keep that in mind. Special considerations related to room and contents fire includes flame overs, thermal layering of gases, and backdrafts. Liquid fuel fires require the proper mixture of fuel and air, an ignition source, and contact between the fuel mixture and the ignition. Gas fuel fires differ from other types of fires and tend to be more volatile. Excuse me. Vapor density reflects the weight of the gas as it is compared to air. So remember, lighter than air and heavier than air. And the flammability limits vary widely from different fuels. We're familiar with the levies, and they're bad. Don't want to be around them. And that fire growth and spread are greatly influenced by building construction. For example, whether or not a compartment goes into flashover, it's greatly influenced by the materials lining the walls and the ceilings of the space. All right, guys, that's our couple chapters here, and I'm going to have kind of a moment. Does anybody have any questions on anything? Anything that kind of want to hit again, have an idea of? No questions?
When will the schedule be posted?
I am emailing that to Rob. It's going to get posted. Should be here pretty soon. I am going to go over that tomorrow is going to be chapter 2 and 3, building construction and type of occupancies. They kind of go hand in hand. We're not going to follow the book, and I should have said this before, and I apologize on it. We're not going to follow the book as it's laid out. We have it kind of rearranged for what's practical for a working fire inspector, and so we'll kind of go by the schedule that my classes are going to be recorded and loaded to YouTube. We have another instructor that's going to be helping out. A little talking about him for a minute. He's retired fire inspector, investigator out of Biloxi, Mississippi. Really good guy, really well experienced, and he should be doing the exact same things. He'd probably be logging on under the same login that I have. So you may see my name, but may see an older gentleman, and it's not me. But again, if you have any questions, feel free. Guys that don't have my information or Rob's information, my email, if you want to have something to write it down, and I'll be making sure to monitor it. But my email is going to be the letter J, head 5502 at gmail.com. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, and if you get into the chapter, you start reading something, and you feel free to give me a call or give me shoot me a text, and I'll answer it as soon as I can. But for the rest of this week is going to be the kind of the classroom lectures. We'll have 2 chapters Tuesday, 2 chapters Wednesday. Thursday and Friday we'll have one, and then we'll kind of go over some applicable skills.
And it's 6 p.m. every night?
6 p.m. every night.
Okay. What's our special code we got to have for tonight?
All right, the special PIN number. Thank you for reminding me. Let's go 1031 001. How you like that? I'll have to write that down so I remember it. All right, so 1031 001, and yeah, everybody got that? And we'll that way you can log in, get your credit for your time. And again, I know there were some guys that wasn't able to join us this evening. Rob's going to have the chapters loaded to YouTube, and I believe there's going to be a link on the website to be able to go with that. But, any other questions?
New.
All right, Chief Bannister, I don't want a phone call tomorrow. What were you talking about? Or a text at like 12. All right, guys. That's what I have so far. Like I said, we'll get some more of the information. We'll get the skills pushed out, and we'll get the class schedule pushed out as well. Again, read over the books, read over the chapters. I know there's a couple guys that don't have their books just yet, but just catch up best that you can whenever you get them, and we'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock, technology permitting. I apologize for today. It's anytime I'm around technology, it never really works out too well, but we'll do our best to make it work.
Hey, Jonathan, I do have one question.
Yeah.
Can we get the slideshow? Is there any way you can download that to the website, or get with Rob and see if he can do it?
I will get with Rob and see if we can. Yeah, I mean that would be great. And that would help out tremendously. Let me get with him and see what the best way, whether we can have it on the website or if he's may have to do it individually. If need be, we may try to print it out on one of those like a resource guide or something like that, where it prints out all the slides, and we'll figure out a way. All right, gentlemen. I appreciate y'all for logging on. Again, bear with me. This is my first class to be taught by a computer, and it's yeah, it's different. But we'll make it through it, and we'll get through this class, and hopefully we'll learn some things and enjoy it. But all right, guys. Well, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here because I'm about to shut this thing down.
All right, thanks, bro. Appreciate it, man.
All right, thank y'all. Yeah, have a good night.
Appreciate it, Jonathan.
All right, thank you.